Maybe I won't have to yell that anymore. And we're live. Welcome to paraglidingtalk.com. I'm your host, Robert Michaels. Super glad you're here tonight. We've got a great episode tonight. We've got Jordan Neidinger with us in moderation. We've got Anthony Paragliding. Gosh, I'm getting feedback here. Hang on just a second. Where is that noise coming from? Wow. It's missing.
Getting messages from space.
It's showing a video right now. Oh, there it is. It was hidden. Gosh, it was so loud in my ears right now too, and it was hidden. I won't make that mistake again. Also in moderation, we have Sean Nafsker, and Scotty is with us. Scott's in moderation. He's got a brand new seat with the moderation team. So Scott, thank you for being here. If you don't see Scott, it's because he's got one commitment a month that he won't be able to. But other than that, he's made full level commitment that he will be available for a moderator on air moderation. Yeah, so Scott is local here in San Diego as well. So the locals are taking over. Sorry, Sean, you might have to move to San Diego.
It's a 10-year contract.
10-year contract. Yeah. We're actually going into. We're 5 years coming up really quick here.
Yeah. I'm still waiting on my 200 episodes. Congratulations for being a moderator and not hurting yourself or breaking yourself or doing anything risky.
Verbal.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
I do want to apologize ahead of time. Once again, we've got internet problems, and we can blame Verizon Wireless. I did talk to somebody from their organization, and I said, hey, look, we pay for this certain amount of gigabytes, and if I don't get that many gigabytes, then I wanted either a discount or you need to figure out what's going on with cell towers. And so they were supposed to open a ticket and they were supposed to do all this stuff. And it turns out they upgraded my phone and said, okay, temporarily we're going to work with you and we're going to give you the full shebang for your phone, and then you can hotspot it over or whatever. I tried it before the show and it didn't work. So it's not that it didn't work. It just doesn't, it's not high speed. So if it goes glitchy and we lose it, I apologize ahead of time. Just know that it's my fault, not anyone else's. I want to talk about some sponsors. Paragliding Talk is brought to you by a couple brand new sponsors, DreamLifterParamotors.com. They are a training group. I know for sure it's at least one or two people that are doing the training out here in Southern California or middle of Southern California. It's Harley Milne. And if you don't know Harley Milne, I want to just encourage you, go find him on Facebook, follow the website. There's a link in the description. Also, you can see in the moderators, Anthony just dropped it in the chat. But if you're wanting to get training, you're in California and you're somewhere in the middle of California, he's got a great place to train and just a really good head on his shoulders. Adventure pilot. He's got world records for flying coast to coast. He's got some great adventure videos on his YouTube channel. But if you want to get trained, that is a great place to start your training. That is www.dreamlifterparamotors.com. Also want to mention this sponsor. This is Andrew Fuller. He is now repairing gliders, doing repacks, and he does SIVs as well. You can check out his website at paraglider/inspection or paraglider-inspection.myspotify.com and go there and check out what he has to offer. I also want to mention PPG Smoke. PPGsmoke.com is the website. They've got all kinds of great things. I just got another text message like 2 or 3 days ago that the headsets, there's a whole nother batch of headsets that are coming out for testing. And then we should see he's really happy with the next run. And so there's going to be all kinds of stuff that he's going to be sending out emails and text messages and all that stuff. It's taken forever, but he's got a good thing going. And so eventually he'll have a masterpiece of a product. Go to ppgsmoke.com. Check out all the things that they have. Paramotorprops.com is also a sponsor of the show. Paramotorprops.com. If you blow up a prop you can get a brand new one really quickly and relatively inexpensive. I know that there's more expensive places. You may be able to find some off-brand for cheap or whatever, but they have really good stuff. Paramotorprops.com is the website. So appreciate you guys coming on. Special thanks to Jordan for pulling it together and coming to be on the show. He had to have someone cover for him on the training field so that he could come tonight. And so I really appreciate you making that. That's huge to me. And then also want to say thanks. Jordan is an overachiever, created his own thumbnail and sent it to me so that I didn't have to do that work. He knows how hard it is and what a pain it is to put stuff together like that. And he does a really good job. So I appreciate you, Jordan, for coming on and joining us tonight. So welcome. I want to talk a little bit about weather tonight. Now, when I first met Jordan, we were at Torrey Pines Glider Port. I was as a new aspiring pilot, and I was super excited and anxious about getting into the air. And I had no flights yet, but I had bought my own gear off of eBay. He's putting his gear away. It's the end of the night at Torrey Pines, and he stopped me, or I stopped him. And because I had a feeling he was a pilot, but not only that, he was a tandem pilot and an instructor. And so I'm like, hey, man, I'm really stoked about getting in the air at some point. I bought my own gear. I'm doing some self-training stuff. And he was like, hey, bro, I just want to give you some feedback. And one of the big things that he said was, you don't know what you don't know. And this sport has a lot of unknowns when you come into it. And it's really important to get training. And so if you can do it, that's the ticket. That's the ticket to flying and freedom and a long-term enjoyment in a sport. And I remember walking away from that like, okay, yeah, you don't know what you don't know. Okay. And really processing that. But what stuck out to me after I talked to a few other people, I told them that I had met Jordan and they were like, this guy knows weather like no other. And you should talk to him about how to predict the weather, because I was going to be flying in the mountains. And so I wanted to start off the show tonight talking about this. A lot of guys watching are to be paramotor pilots, but many of them are free flight pilots. What is your go-to when you're coming into a day? Maybe you're going to make plans. You're like, I'm going to take off work 4 weeks from now, or a month from now, or a month, or 3 months, or a year. Talk a little bit about your decision-making and where are you going? And maybe we can pull up some of those websites while you're talking and take a look at that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, fortunately, I've just been working on a course that I'll be making a digital product out of, and it's flight planning for new pilots. And I run through some of the logic behind why we make a certain type of flight plan based on our skill level, the desirable conditions for that skill level, and then where we happen to be on the planet and the season. So it all kind of plays in together if you're trying to come up with a suitable condition to be flying in. And the idea is that, we want to avoid getting into air that's well above our skill level, and we still want to enjoy ourselves and have good flights. We have a luxury here where we can, because we're in Southern California, we can fly almost daily when the season's on. So, answering that question first, it's almost like you don't have to flight plan if the season is on, because it's daily flying. You just have to look for windows of opportunity in the day. One day to the next will present a golden hour, a time when whatever skill level you are, that would be okay for you to get into the air and you wouldn't be above your head. But as far as weather resources go, the CSS website has a nice collection just to get started. I run people through that, my students, I run them through a few of those models before I get into anything else. And that's addressing the basics: wind speed, direction, variation in those two, gusting and switching winds. And you can see just a little bit of information as far as what's going on at the site. We have live data captured from the launches themselves, and that can help us put together not just what the forecast says, but a bit of the observable conditions, if you would, think of it that way before you get to the site. So being able to look through a week of data and the forecast, it's good. It changes a lot. The forecast is always wrong, as I say it. It's this, well, it's being updated all the time. And so it's never going to be correct, especially the longer out that you go. So the most accurate that it can be is when you have consistency in terms of time and altitude throughout the day. And then you also have, the day of that you're looking at, and not, a week from the day. So that's where we go to first when we just start looking at wind speed and direction. But that's very limited, because the wind speed and direction that we get from our site-specific models, they're just talking about the air at the site. And obviously there's much greater influences at the meso and synoptic scale that we have to take into account if we want to understand the driver behind the weather that we're experiencing on a regional sense. Then we need to look at a bigger picture. So that's one challenge, is to start educating students about what drives the weather in our region. And then the next one that I'm up against with almost everybody is trying to shed light on vertical weather. So SKU-T charts and looking at different layers in the troposphere. So if you look at the 500 millibar level, it's a lot different than what you get at the surface winds analysis. And that can help you out a lot in determining the overall bias of the region. So looking at weather from the top down, especially in our region, where we happen to be at a latitude on the planet where the air comes down and creates this high pressure system most of the time, that's what we're looking at the synoptic scale. And then when we get that forecast data, a lot of it is interpolated mathematically and algorithmically in between the data points. So we have weather balloons, but obviously they're not at every site. They're going to be spread out pretty far away, but we can still see SKU-T data forecast models at just about any location. And while it's not precise, it does kind of fill in the gaps the best that it can. When you go to a site like Windy, you have several different weather models that you can compare. So that's a handy tool. It's getting better over the years. I remember it about 5 years ago, and they really were just kind of catering to surfers, like windsurfers and the such. But now you're seeing site specific for paragliding information, and they have really good coverage. And so I do a few classes on looking at Windy as well. The importance of reading weather in the vertical sense, I try to drive that home because there's a few things that we're looking for there. It's not just is it going to be a good flying day? We also want to look at turbulence factor, and sometimes people get confused. The term instability or unstable air does not directly relate to turbulence. And when we get down to it, turbulence is what can make it a rough ride for us, a really nasty experience. And if you were going to draw out some information to help you with that, you're actually looking at conditions that are lining up that would produce those results. So just to give an example, we're heading into a season now. We have high pressure systems in our area, and that's great for clear blue skies and lots of sunny, thermic days. But we also have that resistance. So you have some convective inhibition going on there with just the high pressure. And then we have inversion layers in our area where we have, clear skies overnight. And so you have all of the short wave radiation coming in heating up the ground, and then at night it's long wave and it radiates out into space. So you get these overnight inversion layers that linger on into the next day. So they create a cap, kind of a ceiling, that the convective lift can only go so high before it starts to smash into that ceiling. And then when it's really hot, we can have dry conditions. And when you have dry conditions, you basically have kind of rattier edges to the thermals. If you have humidity in there, roughly like a 30% on a hot day, it would have the effect of softening the edges, the transitions in and out of thermals. And that's why coastal flying, even thermic coastal flying, is usually a little easier to handle than inland mountain flying in the desert condition. The last thing that I kind of throw out there is, we get dust devils when you're talking about inland desert flying, mountain flying, and being able to identify dust devil conditions, that kind of goes hand in hand with the choppy, rough air as well, because you have a super adiabatic ground layer where you have high surface temperatures. You have a very thick planetary boundary layer, which is basically squashing out all of the airflow. And when you have a lot of sun reaching the ground in those conditions, you're still going to get convection taking place, but the way that it takes place can be very aggressive or
I was going to say rowdy.
Yeah, it's dynamic. It's very
Yep.
it takes place in a certain way. So if you think about how, like, an ice skater, when they make turns and they pull in and they can go faster by pulling their arms in, that's kind of what you get when you have a really hot surface layer. When you do have something finally push through that planetary boundary layer that's so thick and there's not much wind to disturb this process, as that starts to pull in, you get that rotation because it's coming from a much greater distance on the surface to do that. So then you get that kind of dust devil condition. And we talk about this super adiabatic ground layer. There's a layer of air that's in close contact with the ground. When we talk about the adiabatic process, that is a thermodynamic term where they're talking about a process in and of itself that doesn't have transference of heat from the ambient or outside fluid or air. But when you see the dust devil condition, often you're getting the mirage. You can see mirages on flat level surfaces. And that right there is the diabatic process, where there's actual contact between the air and the ground layer. And,
interesting.
Yeah, so there's ways to identify the potential for those. You could just say, well, it's a really hot day, but that's not all of it. If the wind is scrubbing that layer off and it's not letting it build up, then you're less likely to have dust devil conditions. In general, and they're all kind of clues in and of themselves, because if the air is moving, you don't get as much surface heating because it cools that down too. It starts to, you get the vertical mixing and entrainment, and it starts to pull heat and moisture up through the PBL. So there's a ripe set of conditions that will produce negative type of flying conditions for us. And then there's the other stuff. One thing that kind of goes along with this, you can get lift in various ways, and not all lift is created equal. We all know that we have convective lift, and we have orographic lift. There's convergence lift, frontal lifting. There's even vorticity max point lifts. But the essence of it, to be able to identify what kind of lift you're getting into, is another key factor in flight planning. Because let's just say that you have the moisture, like we're talking about the opposite condition now. There's lots of ground level moisture and humidity. Maybe it rained the night before, or there's a lot of retention in the ground. And, in the season right now, we have a lot of vegetative matter on the ground. So we, in just this, few months, have been getting a lot of days where you have a lower level of free convection. So the LFC has come down substantially. because when you have all of that moisture coming off the ground and lower layers, the level at which it starts to condense out and saturate can be like, for us, just 3,000 feet over the ground.
That's it.
Yeah. And so when you have a low LFC, you can expect kind of the cloud suck condition. So maybe you launch at a normal launch site, you're not getting much lift. If you can eke your way up a little bit, now you might actually be in danger of getting pulled into a cloud. So it's rather the opposite feeling. Yeah. Instead of having the stronger stuff ripping off the ground with the thermic convection, you actually have condensation and that latent heat that's starting to pull in the surrounding air, and it's building in a different level as you're flying. So as far as flight planning, knowing if there's going to be a lower LFC, or if you're going to have the LCL at a certain altitude, that can be another helpful hint if you're looking for cross-country days. That could be helpful as well if you have a higher cloud base, then you have more room, more altitude for that energy to build up and gain some momentum. And we can think of it as entrainment. It's pulling the rest of the air with it as it gets up to the cloud base and then has that state of matter change. So and then in our area we have really good convergence flying days, and windy, I find the HRRR model, if you're paying for the hourly, the yearly subscription, you can get the hourly breakdown. And the HRRR model only gives you 3-day outlook, but it's pretty precise. It's got a lot of good data. And so that's another good way of catching good days, is being able to find the time and the opportunity and the location of those convergences taking place.
So let's break down convergences for a minute, and I'll try to put up a simulation or whatever of where we can find some. I don't know if we're going to be able to find it in any kind of forecast right now, but maybe break that down for people that don't really. If you're not a free flight pilot, you probably have heard the term, but let's break it down. Convergence and convergence flying. I absolutely, by the way, I love convergence flying. It is like one of the greatest things that is in paragliding, in my opinion.
Yeah, convergence flying is really, really sweet. You can gain tremendous altitude, and you don't really have to search for the lift. You're basically just spot, and you'll get pushed up with the air mass. It's basically two air masses that are running into each other. Maybe they've come around a mountain. You can get it that way. You can get a coastal versus inland air meeting up against each other. We have katabatic convergence at the end of the day, leading to magic air and glass off conditions. So when you're looking for convergence, the way that you're going to see it on a surface winds analysis is you'll have air that's basically flowing towards another air mass. So those wind barbs are kind of going towards each other. And then in the middle, you're going to see a stagnation of the air. So it's going to be very, very low wind speed. And that area of low wind speed is going to stretch out like a line, or it might just wiggle around like a snake. And sometimes you get it over ranges, and sometimes you get it right through the middle of valleys. But where you see the air suddenly stopping, that's usually a convergence. And the key to it is you're looking for days where the air masses that are opposing are not overpowering each other by any significant degree. And that way they're just kind of butting up against each other. You can have a good side of a convergence and a nasty side of the convergence, depending on what the conditions that are bringing that air together, where they're coming from. And sometimes you can see a convergence in the sky by just looking at the air. You can see some air mass clearer, and then on the other side you're getting maybe more moisture, or maybe more particulate matter, depending on where that air comes from. So
yeah, what an incredible thing to see conversions. On the best conversions flying days I've saw where I had like hundreds of spider webs in my lines. I look up and in the sunlight, I can see the reflection of them all. I don't know. I guess any day can produce that, but on my big convergence days, I get a lot of that.
yeah, and oftentimes you're getting cloud formation. It's just in our region, we don't get a lot of clouds in the summer months sometimes. And on convergence days, you might be able to see that line stretching out across the valley too.
Yeah, big cloud street going across that's always taunting me from when I'm working. I'm down in the valley and I look up and I see a cloud street pointing at a convergence going across the whole range all the way to Palm Springs. And I'm like, oh, wish I could go fly. Yeah, I've got to rearrange my life to be able to fly more convergence.
Yeah, it can be really good days.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jordan. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to quickly talk about the first convergence I got into. It was at Lake Elsinore. And when I showed up, I had no idea really what a convergence was. I just knew that there was kind of some buzz around it. It was going to be a good day. And this is back in the day before Uber. I went there, I had my $20. And to me, it was a lot of money at the time. I was pretty broke. And so I got out there and I had my $20 for the van that was going to come pick us up if we didn't make it to wherever we were going. And everybody started getting ready. And I noticed they were like kind of scrambling, but I was talking to some guy about my GPS or something. And I watched everybody launch. And then I got into the air and my flight was 6 minutes straight down to the bottom. Yeah.
Oh, no.
And I was just furious. I couldn't believe it. I knew that I missed something, but I didn't know what it was. And so the next day I was, okay, I got $20 more together and I'm going to go do this. And I'm not going to mess around this time. And somebody told me on the launch, they said, look, when you have the air coming in from the valley side, take a look at the flag behind the launch. And when you see that flag starting to blow towards you, that's the coastal, that's the maritime air that's starting to flow in. And you launch before that dominates and switches the direction on the launch. And I was like, man, I'm not going to miss this. And I get out there and I remember they told me, they said, you don't want to cross the lake unless you're at 7,500 or else you might not make it. So make sure you're at 7,500. And I was really worried, from the day before that I wasn't going to get even 7,000 out of it. And I remember launching, and before I could even look down to see what altitude I was on my Vario, I was just beeping all the way without making a turn. And the first time I looked down at it, it said 12,500. Yeah. And I just was like, oh, geez, I'm done. And I remember I was looking behind me and I saw this hang glider come in, and there was a cloud developing right behind me. And I was having a hard time getting away from it. And this guy goes behind me in a hang glider and he just goes right into that cloud, just sucked them straight in. Oh, and I saw that and I was like, oh, I'm dead. Like this is how I die today. So, gosh. That was a crazy experience. That was a nice 4.5 hour flight. I got all the way to Hemet on that flight.
Wow.
But that was and that's a pretty common route. I mean, people have been doing that for 30 years easy. But for me, that was my first taste of convergence flying, and easily the biggest flight that I had at that time. So if you've never done convergence flying, that's going to be one of the sweetest that you'll ever get into.
I'll pull up some video and we'll talk a little bit more about convergence flying. Let's spin the wheel, and we're going to give something away. And so no more names in the wheel, Sean. So glad that you're here, by the way. Everybody that's watching tonight,
one of my favorite things is giving away somebody else's free stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Ray Pierce made a whole bunch of these trinkets, and I don't have any here, but it's a little device that holds your micro SD cards, and then also a deal that mounts to your throttle that you can put a mirror on, so you can check your gas level or check to see if your GoPro's on or whatever. So yeah, go ahead and let it rip, Sean.
All right.
And
All right.
I'll mention the
I thought you were-
sponsors.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead and let it rip.
Go.
The spin of this wheel, by the way, is brought to you by Calamity Kite Clinic. CalamityKiteClinic.com is the website. Sean will teach you how to ground handle and kite your wing better than you did before. It's nice to have someone look at what you're doing wrong and give you some pointers and tips, and then show you how to properly and be successful at ground handling. And if you want to be the best, it's going to require some focused attention. So CalamityKiteClinic.com will help you with that. Also, the spin of this wheel is brought to you by Nebraska PPG. Josh Bowden runs a school in Nebraska. If you're interested in getting some top-notch training, you can sign up with Josh and his team today. There's a link in the description to get a hold of him. The classes are filling up very fast, so get a hold of those. Oh, Max Acro Paragliding.
Oh,
Yep. Winner, chicken dinner. And you know what? Of all the people that could use one of the micro SD card holders, it's Max. Max,
congratulations, Max Acro Paragliding.
He's one of the sponsors. So that's a fitting place to mention maxacro.com. Maxacro.com is the website. He has an SIV clinic pretty much every other month or so, maybe every month, and sometimes it's every weekend. If you go and check out his website, you'll find out where the slots are that you can fill and get on board with an SIV training. There's some clinics that they do overseas, and even in Mexico. I think they've done some in South America, and there's some really good flying places. So if you want to go and check those out, go and check out maxacro.com. Sign up today. So Jordan, I also, my favorite flight this far is from Elsinore, and it was on a convergence day. And we, like you said, we're setting up, and the convergence was pretty much on top of us in the first part of the day, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And by, I want to say 1:30, 2 o'clock, we were still batting around launch, trying to find this, elevator ride to the top of lift. That day was about 10 grand, maybe 11 grand. Some guys, touched 10.5, and then we went on glide. But fighting down low on that particular day, I got very low, and I thought I was setting up to land, and I'm like, it's game over. I just drove an hour and a half. I'm going to be the retrieve guy now. All these thoughts are going through your mind, like, oh man, I suck again. And I found this dream thermal down low. It was a little sharp, a little scary, but when you are low and you're looking for something to get you out, it's worth it. Like you'll bat your wing and deal with whatever's coming at you, just so you can get back up. And we got up, and I'm actually glad that I was the last one to get to altitude, because all the guys in the front were like on the front of the wave. So if you can picture the convergence as kind of like this, this wind's coming that way, this wind's, these guys had went out in front of it, and then they started bombing out. But as I came, I'm climbing up the mountain of the convergence, and then I caught up to them and even passed them up. It was great. And so the timing of it's almost like a wave that's coming. I want to mention a couple things real quick. Will Fly donated $5 to the super chat. He said Resurgence, PPG rocks, and NASCAR is okay too. My mom donated $5 to the super chat. Also, before the show even started, John Wayne donated $10 to the super chat. Thank you, John Wayne. Appreciate Will Fly, and Mom, thank you for your contribution. You keep the show going. And also want to mention, if you want to support the show on Patreon, jump on board. There's a whole handful of people that are supporting the show for the price of a cup of coffee and keep the show going and learn something. So maybe Jordan, if you can break down, let's talk a little bit more about these choosing a convergence flying day. And I know you know your site very well. And so what you have in your head, I need to try to, what's the word? Extrapolate that information. There's things that you have in there that we want. What are you looking for the day before or even 2 days before that would make the difference? What would you say, okay, I'm not going to try to fly in this, or I would fly in this? Talk about your choices, and I'll pull up some screen share here.
Well, the regional atmospheric soaring predictor is a handy tool for us, and they have a couple of ways you can identify convergence patterns ahead of time. So one is just simply looking at the wind direction and the the surface wind analysis. They're pegged at, I think it's 3 and 10 meters off the ground. And when you see the air direction, you have confluence, which the air is kind of meeting up and flowing in one direction. But when it's a little more of a kind of a perpendicular pattern, then that's the convergence. And you can scroll through the little selectors. There's another one for like a buoyancy indicator. And because you're not going to see that with the thermic.
You said thermic regional atmospheric soaring prediction.
Yeah.
What is the website?
You would have to Google Dr. Jack.
Dr. Jack soaring forecast. Got it.
Yeah, and look for Southern California.
Okay.
And that'll give you 3 days out. You can look and see if you've got a good convergence day lining up. So you get clues from maybe one model, and then you can go to another and see if that data is lining up. And like I said, Windy has a really good tool for it, the HRRR. And that one seems to be something you could plan almost, by the hour, very accurately for a convergence day. So, that's basically it. If you have any models that can give you that buoyancy factor there, yeah, might be. Yeah, I'm not sure if you've hit it. Just maybe try RASP blip maps at the top. A little further down. Next one. Yeah,
I'm
try
glad you
that
can
one.
see this.
Yeah, go to Southern California right there. There you go. Oh, you passed it. It's on Los Angeles. Yeah. Wow. So RASP is the thing with RASP, and it says, if you back up one frame, I'll show you real quick.
Back up one frame. Okay.
Yeah. So if you read all that stuff up there, it's basically saying that they're using government data, NOAA and whatever else, but they're overlaying it with the topographical maps of the region, and they're using people's home computers to basically crunch that data and account for the effect of terrain. And they're giving us more precision than you would get from in almost any other weather source. And that's why this is for pilots and by pilots. Yeah, that's why it's a really good tool, because when you're trying to look at specific sites and the influences, like the general public doesn't care what's going on at Marshall Peak or Lake Elsinore launch, whatever it is, but if there's terrain influence that can be calculated, and it says there, most of the time, if they don't want to crunch that data, it's just going to be mathematical interpolation. But this one actually, does the calculation and tries to account for the terrain features. So that's really useful for us. And all those little regions right there, they're like, squares or rectangles that are centered over popular flying sites. So you don't get this everywhere. If you're like in the middle of, Oklahoma or something, you're not going to get this data, but you can see all of the different ones that we do have. So go back to Southern California there.
Oh, need to go back here.
Yeah, and so there you have, if you zoom out there, like you just zoomed in, but zoom out, that's the limits to the RASP in our region. You can go to the Southern California and maybe pick up San Diego, but that's basically it for our area. There you go. You have South, and then you have both of them together. So if you go to North, you'll see maybe Lake Elsinore, and we can look for one of those signature days. And so right now you're looking at noon, but Elsinore tends to click off around 11, maybe 10 a.m. sometimes. It can be later, but there you go. You have the time slots right there. You'll have to zoom in a little bit. And right now you're selected for thermal updraft velocity. So that's only telling you your heat, signatures there. So if you maybe go to surface winds at 2 meters right there, that can give you see how you have the flow right there coming off the ocean. Yeah. And if you scroll over a little bit, you might be able to see, right. And that looks pretty strong. So it's probably dominating the convergence that you would get on a normal day. And you have to have a certain amount of pressure inland to counteract that. If you have low pressure inland, then it's just going to flow in. You're going to get advection taking place, horizontal advection, and it's just going to kind of flow through the region in one direction. But if you have a little bit of higher pressure inland, then that's where you're getting the onshore and the inland stuff. So maybe a little bit right there, just at the end, you can see it's kind of switching around the mountain. Maybe go to, you're on Saturday. What did it say for Friday? Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see like a really strong convergence over the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
But when you do see it, actually, you want me to share something real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
I actually have some convergence pictures right here.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
Okay. So this is a convergence line setting up over the San Bernardino Mountains to the north. And you can see this, the wind speed that is what we're looking at right here. So you have the lower wind speeds in purple, and you have the higher wind speeds, in the lighter blue. And it's a nice day in general. We don't see any red or orange on there. So it's not high winds to begin with. And then as you look at the direction, you can see that you have some air from the high desert that's kind of flowing south. And then you have the maritime coming in at kind of a southwest direction. So where those two meet up, you're getting a stagnation point in between, and the air has nowhere to go but up along that line. And it happens in this one just to be on the range itself, which is typical because you're getting added to that a little bit of the orographic effect as it moves through those mountains. The next one I have here is the Elsinore convergence line. Let me just share that. And this one's really pronounced as it goes through the middle of Paris.
Oh, interesting.
Then, yeah, so you can, now if you go earlier when the wind was, kind of coming into the site, and you could be already in the air at this point, then you would be able to just basically ride this line all the way across. This one's unfortunately a little far to the north for a good flight. You probably would be getting into March Air Force Base airspace.
Right.
And you don't want to mess with that, obviously. But if you can catch one, this is Saboba right here in San Jacinto.
Yeah.
You can get one that just rolls straight across, or maybe a little south towards Diamond Valley Lake. Then you can cross that entire valley on that line. and the convergence line moves throughout the day. It just depends. If you were to scroll this one out, which we can't because it's a screenshot, you would probably see that the air flows around these Ortega Mountains. Some of it goes to the north and some of it goes from the south. And as it meets in the middle, and if you look real close, you can see the direction, how it's pointing towards the convergence on each side. And then here's the larger scale, or kind of the expanded regional convergence lines. We already saw this one, but you can see how there's another one setting up all the way down into Mexico.
Yep.
So, and this is off of Windy. So a great tool there using the HRRR model. You might even be able to launch, somewhere around, I don't know, Pasadena.
Yeah.
But, you can fly that entire line. And if you had altitude, you can jump that Banning Gap and make your way all the way down south. If you were lucky and skilled at the same time, you might have a fantastic flying day. Or if you're in a hang glider, you probably make that trip pretty easy. So that's the essence of it. Just you're looking for those patterns. But keep in mind too, you're looking at a surface wind analysis. So to really see what you're going to get out of it, you can scroll through the layers. And Windy lets you do that too. But sometimes you're getting higher pressure aloft and sometimes you're getting lower pressure. It kind of depends on, a few things, the meandering of the jet stream or whatever. If you're getting areas of higher vorticity, then that could help facilitate that rising motion versus squashing it out. So not every day is the same, even on a convergence.
I found a live version. It looks like it's in the middle of the country. I'm assuming that's what you mean here.
Yeah, that's
There
a
you
nice
go.
line right there. I would, since it's there, I would probably also select for precipitation and make sure you're not getting like a stationary front or something, but because that's a lot of wind speed coming off you see how it's all green and you're getting areas of yellow.
Yeah.
So that might be maybe more than you want. And there might even be some precipitation stacking up along those lines right there.
I
Now,
can
Jordan-
hear Gringo getting hooked. Sorry, Scott.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just curious about wind shear because that's the thing that I always hit. And is there a way to really see that on the map as
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, and
That's a great question, Scott.
right. Something that the skew T chart is really useful for that. You can get that from the sounding. And, you have to, in the plain states especially, you have to be careful with the wind shear because you're basically, when you get these horizontal rotating vorticity tubes, from the wind shear, if those end up standing up, then you could actually get, storms, convective storms. And that's where you're getting some pretty nasty activity, actually, even to the point of tornadoes. But wind shear for us, yeah, it's sometimes we get these boundaries at our site where, you're just getting bounced around in between them. So you can also have vertical shear as well if you have a lot of movement going on. So being able to see from like Cape values and all that, how much unstable air is contributing to that. But and that's another thing that obviously the vertical weather aspect in flight planning comes into play. I just had a pretty interesting flight on a paramotor where I flew over Crestline when it got state of emergency, 10 feet of snow and all that.
Yeah.
And
Oh my gosh.
it was the day that I went, it was blowing south on the LZ when I took off, and right at about 4,000 feet, there was a layer of north, and the transition between those two was enough to make me drop my camera and freak out a little.
Really?
I had to start flying the aircraft again. But it was
Wow.
wild because, going through that layer in a paramotor, it was pretty aggressive. And I feel a lot more comfortable with a free flight harness on juggling the
Yeah.
nasty air like that. But
Yeah. Me too. If
Now,
Scott, I'm gonna just point out something here. So if you look at this QT, you're looking at two things here. One is your dew point, and one is your temperature at altitude. And as I'm scrolling back and forth, you can see that the temperature changed. I don't know if you guys can see this or not,
mhm.
but as I'm scrolling back and forth, now you can see that right about, we'll say 5,500 feet, something like that. You can see the wind direction change from the barb is pointing west, and then it's going east. And so whenever you see the barbs pointing at each other, and the closer they are together is where you're going to find the wind shear, typically on a skew T chart. So that's where you're going to find some interesting air for sure. In this case,
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about it. It's a half a barb and a half a barb. So you got like 5 and 5. That's more of a convergence indicator to me than fear of wind shear. That's just my opinion. Jordan, feel free to chime in if I'm giving fake news. But when it comes down to business, I would say if you've got wind barbs that are 10 plus pointing at each other, and you're just a few, maybe I would say 500 feet apart from each other, get ready for a wild ride. And that video that went viral that I posted, I believe I hit the shear at Palomar, and it woke me up pretty good.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also you have that plotter right there that's giving you direction as well as you move up through the millibars there. And so where
Yep.
you see significant shifts there, that can be an indicator. You know, in our region, we do get the layered up, stuff sometimes, and wind shear is not always opposing wind. Sometimes it can even be going in the same direction, but you just have one going significantly faster than the other.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, transition between those zones can be abrupt. A lot of times, and I'm not sure, I'd have to see the weather on the day that you're talking about, Robert, but a lot of times if you're hitting the inversion layer, you can get rocked quite a bit too, because when thermals hit that and they start it's like if you have smoke hitting a ceiling, you'll see those rotating plumes coming out from the side. And that's the effect. Sometimes we have that heavy cap or that inversion layer that's kind of when we hit that, we're getting smashed. And there was actually an accident at our site where we had a pilot who was flying early morning, and she did like 3 good flights, and on her 4th one, she got rocked pretty hard by hitting that layer and lost control of her glider.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
When the inversion is very fascinating to me. When you get to the place where you're hitting the inversion, and then you find some, maybe it's a mountain that gets you through. Maybe it's a thermal that will pop you through the inversion, and then you're above the inversion. You find like this whole nother opportunity of a lift, and this whole nother, it's like it's literally like a game. You break through. It's like, yeah, broke through the inversion. And on your way back home, what typically will happen to me is at Blossom, I'll break through the inversion, get up over Blossom, and now I'm at El Cap, and I'm 2,000 or maybe between 3,000 and 4,000, and just playing around. And then on the way back, you forget that the inversion is there, and you're riding on your way back, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, there it is again. It's like you're talking about, these vortices are coming. These things are, I picture it in my mind like a fire hydrant that popped, and you got the top of the fire hydrant just kind of dumps out, and it's wanting to do different things. Now, I will say this, it's fun. It's very random, but it's fun to bounce along the top of the inversion. There's days where you can do that, and it's not always, but it's pretty fun, where you don't lose any altitude on the way back. A little nano climate there.
Yeah, and there's different ways to get those inversion layers. So being able to see where those are, and sometimes, like at our site, you can launch at 5,000 feet if you go to Crestline, and you could launch above the inversion and not have to struggle with it as long as you stay over it.
Yeah, yeah. That's the goal when you're there. It's like, oh yeah, I don't even care about inversion. You're almost always above it. I wanted to mention a couple of sponsors real quick before we wrap up. This show's brought to you by Lone Star Paramotor. If you are in the Lone Star state of Texas, you can reach out to Ron Turan and his team for world-class training. The website that he has is lonestarparamotor.com. That's LONE starparamotor.com. And also want to mention Resurgence PPG. It's tax season. You've got 2 more days till it's time to do your taxes. Want to just encourage you, if you're looking to make a tax deductible donation, that's the place you should do it. Resurgence PPG is a 501c3, so all of your donations are tax deductible there. And you're going to support our men and women that are in uniform that maybe went through some things, PTSD. They find a new reason for life, getting into paramotoring, and eventually free flying. So all things flying, really healing for some people. And no better way to support our men and women of uniform is to support Resurgence PPG. So do that if you get a chance. And I think it's a valiant cause. So Jordan, there was a couple of, Anthony mentioned this before. I want to just give a shout out to some new people. Michael Martin, Adam Giles, BDG HVY 72, James Belleville, and I know Nick Webster. But thanks for chiming in, you guys, for coming on and watching the show. If you are new, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell. If you hit the bell, that way you'll get the 30-minute notification before we go live. We've been having some weird stuff happening with the website. For some people that use Edge, it's saying that my website has phishing. And so I'm just guessing it's because I have a contact form page. So it's possible that you have maybe that thing is worried about the contact form. So if I'm fishing for your information, I don't know what the deal is with that, but yeah, anyways, that's what that's all about. We'll figure it out. I'm going to have to send an email probably to Weebly, and they'll want me to pay for some thing. They always got some kind of scam. They try to internet scam you. We're like, oh, you want to take the banner off? Well, you just pay us $10 a month. Oh, you want to have a website that works? Oh, okay, now you got to pay us, 25. Yeah, whatever.
Like when they added baggage fees,
Yeah.
pay for water, pay for the cookies and the crackers you get.
Yeah. Southwest still owes me 2 meals.
Boom.
Yeah. They said it was too turbulent to bring my food. I was like, that's bullcrap. These are trained professionals. Go get my food. Yeah. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on. And I know it was kind of last minute. There was so much that you unpacked in that episode. I'm going to have to go back and watch it again. And so many other people are going to watch this. I really appreciate your contribution to the show.
Right on, man. Hey, you got time for a little 3D animation?
Absolutely.
All right, check this out. This is something I built for the students, just kind of showing, this is our site right here with the 750 trigger. And hopefully it's not too glitchy, but you can see the hot air rising, pluming out, and then hitting that inversion layer and rippling out.
Whoa, you made that?
Yeah.
Wow,
That was
that
for
is rad.
one of the classes, just kind of showing like, how that goes down. And
Yeah.
try to get it at the exact altitude where you have that inversion like right above the launch sometimes.
That is
That's how
incredible.
I imagined it in my head. Exactly. I'm dead serious. Like when I'm looking at thermals and such, that's what I'm seeing in my head. Like, ooh.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah,
Well, it was a
is
pleasure being
incredible.
on, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to share.
Man, so good. Such good information. So if you want to get a hold of Jordan, maybe you're going to want to get into free flying, plan your trip. You can pretty much fly year round. I mean, it's almost year round here. We call Blossom Awesome Blossom because in most of the world, it's seasonal flying. I can pretty much go there at any given time unless it's raining and send it and have great fun, even if it's a sled ride to the bottom. Same thing with Jordan's site. He's not too far down the road from us and has some really great flying opportunities. Reach out to him through the website, flywithjordan.info, and you're going to find out that his classes are not just something that he's not just going to bash you with information and send you out to, hurt yourself. He's going to give you the goods. You're going to walk away learning something that's going to keep you in the sport the long haul and really have a good time doing it. You can do it in other ways and be scared out of the sport. I know some people that aren't around anymore because they chose that reckless way of learning the sport. You're going to get great things from Jordan. So again, thank you. We're going to go to the after show. If you want to join, we'll put a link in the chat so that you can come hang out with us, and we'll shoot the breeze a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. And make sure, again, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. And thank you for all the supporters who support the show on Patreon and PayPal. You guys are awesome. Thank you for the super chatters, all the moderators, anybody with the tool next to their name. You guys are amazing. And the flying community is even better because of what you bring each week on Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Paraglidingtalk.com. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. We will catch you on the next one. If I don't see you on the air, I'll see you in there. Have a great night.